Welcome to The Porch Online. We're so excited that you're joining us this week. If you're close enough to The Porch, we want to invite you to come join us in person. And if you're not, we're going to encourage you to join a local church in your community, because here at The Porch, we believe gathering is extremely important, because we believe that you can go fast alone, but you'll go farther together. We hope that you enjoy this week's message and learn something new about God.
Well, good morning, everybody. How's it going today? Good to hear it. I know some of the youngsters in here are very excited for this week, being spring break. Come on. I used to be a teacher, so I used to love spring break as well. Honestly, I'm a little jealous of you because we don't get spring break in the adult world anymore. But that's all right. Well, I'm glad you're here today. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Cooper. I am the pastor of the Porch Community Church, and it is such a privilege to be here with you. I'm glad you're in church today. I'm glad that you're here. And if you're joining us online, I'm so glad that you are a part of what we're doing here at Porch Community Church. We'd love to see you in person. And if you can't get here in person, keep watching us online. Be a part of our family that way. But we also want to encourage you to get in a local community, because we know that we can go fast alone, but we'll go farther together. So that's what we do here. We come together. We're excited. As you saw, we're closer to the end of a series called Pre-Decide. Pre-Decide. And we talked about pre-deciding a few different things, 4 different things to start off with. Our very first one is the foundation at which I believe all Christians should operate from and through. And if we don't operate from and through this place, we're actually just a waste of space, quote unquote. Right? That is, I am love. I'm going to operate from a place of love. Paul tells us that no matter what else we do in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, no matter what else we do, if we don't operate or start with love, we're nothing. And so we start with, I am love. Then we came with, I am different, right? Jesus says we've got to be different. I don't want to wake up on a Sunday morning and come to church if it's just a country club. I don't have time for a country club, and I definitely don't have the finances for a country club. This one just happens to be a free one if you treat it that way. We want to look different. Why are people coming to church with you? Why do the people that you work with, go to school with, operate in your neighborhood with, look at you and see something different? You don't not just getting up on a Sunday, but operating and living in a different place. Third thing is, I am generous. We don't want to just give here at the Porch. We don't want to just give to give. We want to be generous. We want generosity to be an identity trait of ours. And then out of that, giving will flow, whether it be our time, our attention, our gifts, our money, whatever that looks like. I am generous. And then finally, the tough one we talked about last week, right? I am forgiving. It's very difficult to choose to forgive if you wait to make that decision after you've been hurt. Right? I went through my hurts. I went through my pains. Not all of them, but one of them. And the reality is, it is difficult to forgive unless you are choosing prior to. The Bible tells us that it's to one's glory to overlook offense. It doesn't mean that offense won't happen, but it is our glory to overlook it. So we can overlook offense, and we can pre-decide to overlook offense. And this week, we are going to be talking about freedom. We're going to pre-decide to be free. And if you want to follow along on the Bible app, feel free to scan right there. There are notes on the back of your bulletin, and that QR code is there as well. So you can write with your hand, you can read on the notes online, or you can be a part of just, writing in your own journal, which is a beautiful thing as well. If you do want a paper Bible, we got those for you as well. Under the seat in front of you, or even underneath your seat, there should be one close to you. So if you want a paper Bible, feel free to follow along there. You guys mind if I start with a story this week? All right. I'm going to start with a story. So this guy was walking by a circus. He's walking by a circus. He looks over and he sees this large African elephant. The elephant is tied to a stake in the ground with just a thin string tied around its ankle. He thought to himself, what a thin string for such a giant animal, right? That elephant could just rip its leg backwards, rip the string right off, and take off running down the street. Get away from the circus, right? Lots of people ran away to the circus. This elephant could run away from the circus. It's all right. Well, he goes to the elephant trainer because he's standing there. He goes, hey, how did you get this elephant to stay here and only walk around this little circle just as far as the rope will let him go without him realizing that he could just break it and get away? The trainer began to describe to him, he said, well, at a really young age, we put a big chain around the ankle of the elephant. And then we stake them to the ground. And so the young elephants, they take off running to try and get away, and it trips them, and they fall. And they can't break the chain. It's too heavy for them. It's too much for them. And they're ripping their legs. They're trying to get it. It hurts them. And so over time, they begin to realize that chain on their leg is keeping them bound, and they can't get away. So as they're younger, we begin to mold that into them, and as they get older, they stop fighting the chain. And when they stop fighting the chain, we replace the chain with a rope. You're absolutely right. The elephant could easily rip the rope and get out, but we've broken them down so much that they think they're trapped by this chain. So the elephant, instead of tugging on the chain, always leaves a little bit of slack in the rope because they don't want to be hurt. They don't want to be in pain, or they just realize they've given up. I'm trapped. I'm stuck here. How many of us are that elephant? How many of us have been dealing with the same sin issue, the same temptations, the same struggles, and we don't even begin to realize that those temptations and those struggles were chains at one point before we came to know Jesus, and now they're just this tiny little rope that we choose to stay bound to. That we choose to just, if this is my stake, I just am going to choose to walk around this little circle. I'm going to do my best to not do that thing. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to put my will into it. I'm going to try everything I can, but I know that I'm bound by that addiction, by that image on the computer screen, by those words that are coming out of my mouth, by the unforgiveness that I have towards somebody. I'm bound, and I can't get free. You know, if you're a Christ follower in here, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to be that elephant. You don't have to be bound anymore. The Bible tells us in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1 through 6, verse 1 says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. Mark my words. I, Paul, tell you that if you let yourselves be circumcised, Christ will be of no value to you at all. Again, I declare to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obligated to obey the whole law. You who are trying to be justified by the law have been alienated from Christ. You have fallen away from grace, for through the Spirit we eagerly await by faith the righteousness for which we hope for. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through, love. Faith through love. All right, anyway, that's a throwback to the start of this. Paul is saying to us, you used to be the elephant bound in chains, right? You used to be stuck in that place, but you are so totally free now. Why are you free now? Because Jesus just wanted you to be free. Isn't that crazy, Keturah? Like the only reason you're free now is because Jesus is like, you know what? For freedom's sake, I'm going to set you free. Because you need to be free. We all need to be free. We all have that sin struggle. We all have that temptation. Maybe different for you than it is for me. But we all have something that's staked to the ground, and we feel the pull and the tug of the rope on our leg. But the reality is, we're free. We're free. So point number one, I want to point out, I've said it 110 times today probably, you are free. It's that simple. You're free. It says, it is for freedom that Christ has set you free. No other reason other than he came to set us free. He came to set the captive free. John 8:28 in the New Living Translation says, so if the Son sets you free, you are truly free. Here's the deal, though. We have to stand firm in that. You see, if Jesus set us free, we're free, right? We're free. So why do we have to pre-decide to be free? Well, we have to make the decision, the realization that we aren't that elephant that is stuck with a chain to their leg anymore. We actually are free of that burden. We are free of that chain. And if we aren't careful, Paul tells us that if we don't stand firm, we will allow ourselves to be burdened again by slavery. And so we need to make sure that we continue to operate and we continue to play in this space, in this reality of, I am free. So when you're tempted to fall into something, and it's a habitual cycle that you find yourself falling into the same temptation, the same sin, over and over, again and again, you say to yourself, no, I'm free. I don't have to do the same thing that I was doing last week. I don't even have to do the same thing that I was doing last night. I can operate in wholeness and freedom right now. But how do I do that? I decide to stand firm in the realization that Christ, through the power of the cross and his blood, has set me free. And you're like, great, Cooper. I'm free. That's cool. Sounds great. What am I free? What does that even mean? I'm free. What does that mean? I still struggle with temptation. I still struggle with all of these different things that I'm in and around. And I struggle with building relationship with people because I got broken in the trust and I was hurt. I still struggle with an addiction. I still struggle with all of these things. So what does free actually mean? Well, there's two things that I want to talk about today. And I want to talk about you are free from sin, the law, and self-righteousness. So point number 2 is you are free from sin, the law, and self-righteousness. So Paul tells us in Galatians chapter 5, verse 2 through 4, he says, mark my words. I, Paul, tell you. That's how I know Paul was the one telling us this. He said, I, Paul, tell you. Context clues, everybody. That if you let yourselves be circumcised, Christ is of no value to you at all. Again, I declare to every man who lets himself be circumcised that you are obligated to obey the whole law. You're trying to be justified by the law and have been alienated from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. Can I let you in on a little secret? Paul was talking about circumcision, but he wasn't really talking about circumcision. Like he was actually talking about circumcision, truly was talking about it to the Gentiles and the church at Galatia and the people that were trying to pressure them into doing that. And if you don't know what that is and you're a youngster in here, I'll let your parents talk to you about it if they want to. But the reality is, Paul is saying if you follow any part of the law, you're obligated to obey all of the law. I'm going to say something that maybe is a little controversial. If you hold yourself to the standard of the 10 Commandments, and that's how you know if you're righteous, can I tell you a secret? The 10 Commandments are just 10 of 613 laws that the Bible has in it. And if you say, I'm going to hold myself to not murder, not commit adultery, I'm not going to say God's name in vain, I'm going to see the Sabbath, which we're going to talk about next week. I'm going to honor my father and mother. I'm going to put no other gods before the Lord. I'm not going to do any idols, and just go through that list. If you set your righteousness based on those 10 commandments, that's great. Those things are awesome. Like, don't murder people. That's good. Like, don't do that. Please, don't do that. Like, those are awesome things. But the reality is, if I base my righteousness off of those 10 things, I better start learning the other 603. I better start operating in the other 603 that are out there. Because Paul tells us that at that point, Christ is of no worth to us. That we've forsaken the righteousness that he paid for on the cross for us. We are set free from the law. Understand me, I'm not saying that you get to act and operate however you want. It's not what I'm saying. You don't get to come in here, act like a child of hell on Saturday, and come worship God on Sunday. That's not how this works. We'll get to that in a moment. But what I'm saying is, if you're basing your righteousness off of what you do, your righteousness is only dirty rags that tear and strain. Your righteousness is like the little leaves that Adam and Eve sewed on themselves when they realized that they were naked and they felt shame for the first time in the garden. You see, the righteousness that Jesus offers, the freedom that Jesus offers, is that clothes that covers everything that God made Adam and Eve in the garden after they made mistakes. You see, I pull this story from the rich young ruler. In the Gospels, Jesus is approached by this rich young man, and he says, "What must I do to get into heaven?" Jesus starts going through a list. He says, well, you got to do this. You got to put no other gods before me or before God. You got to do no idols. And the guy interrupts him about 5 things in. He goes, I do all that. He goes, okay, go sell all your possessions and follow me. You see, a lot of people think, oh, well, it was hard for him to sell all your possessions. It's not a sin to be rich. His sin wasn't that he was rich and had a lot of stuff. His sin was that he had idols in his life. Jesus was pointing out that he had an idol in his life. What was the idol? His money. Jesus said, you want to get to heaven? Follow me. Do what I do. Go where I go. Say what I say. He said, oh, you don't have idols? Go sell your money. Guy went away sad. I think that's a pretty big tell that he's talking about idolatry right there, right? You want to get to heaven? Let me tell you right now, that's not the goal. The goal is not to get to heaven. What if heaven was just you and Jesus sitting at a table by yourselves? Would that be enough for you? The goal is relationship with Jesus. The goal is to operate in relationship with Jesus. See, when you're free from self-righteousness, you don't have to hide yourself because you know Christ covered it. And following him is the way that we know we're free from the law. That rich young ruler did better than me. I mean, I didn't murder anybody, but I've said the Lord's name in vain. He said, I've never done that. And Jesus called him out. In Romans chapter 4, verse 2 through 4 is Abraham. This is just another great example of righteousness and in being free of our own desire to be self-righteous and being free of having to follow the 613 commands that God gave us in the Old Testament and being free from the sin that so readily entangles us, right? He says, if his good deeds, his was Abraham, had made him acceptable to God, he would have had something to boast about. So if you do all 613 commands and that makes you acceptable to God, you would have something to boast about. He said, but that was not God's way. Abraham, the law came after Abraham, but Abraham wasn't perfect. Abraham made a lot of mistakes. Abraham let his wife tell people that she was his sister, which was true. It's true, look it up. But didn't tell them that they were married and almost caused sin to come into a place. He almost caused somebody else to stumble, right? And Paul tells us, don't be a stumbling block. If somebody else is struggling, don't do that. Actually, in Romans as well. It says, but that was not God's way. For the scripture tells us, Abraham believed God, and God counted it as righteousness because of his faith. When people work, their wages are not a gift, but something they've earned. Your freedom was not earned by your goodness. My freedom was definitely not earned by my goodness. I don't know you personally or every detail of your life. I know a lot of you, and I'm getting to know a lot of you better, and I think all of you are incredible people. But I don't think there's a single person in this room good enough to earn their own freedom. There's just not, and that's okay. And that's what Jesus is for. It's for freedom's sake that Christ has set us free. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 through 10, it just reiterates, God saved you by his grace when you believed, right? When we believed. And you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Your belief isn't work, it's a decision, right? I chose to believe in who Jesus is. I chose to believe in what Jesus did. And then God says, okay, that's all I need. Because Jesus already did the work on the cross, and now I'm going to cover you in my righteousness. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. For we are God's masterpiece, and he created us anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the good things he had planned for us long ago. You see, each one of us in this room who follows Jesus, and if you're in this room and you don't follow Jesus, can I tell you that Jesus has a plan for your life, that God created a plan for your life, and he asks you to trust him. And when you make the decision to trust him, the Bible tells us that man plans his way, but God orders his steps. And you get a step into what he has, the good things that he has for you. You have the freedom to not do and be stuck in the bad things that you know are going on in your life. You're no longer chained to that stake in the ground. You're actually free to walk with Jesus. Now, I said we get to that later. This does not mean we get to live however we want. Our freedom is not a license to run around acting like the world, right? We talked about this in week, let's see, I can see what week it is here. Give me a second. Week number 2, we're different. We're not different because of our own strength and our own will and our own desires. We're different because we began to follow Jesus. And when we follow somebody, we do what they do, we say what they say. I don't operate in a place, in a space as a husband to my wife like a person in this world. I don't go out and flirt and check out other women and do things I shouldn't be doing as a husband, not because that's not the right thing to do. It isn't the right thing to do, but that's not why I do it. I do it because I'm in love with my wife. I do it because I want to please my wife. I do it because it's who I am, right? And that's the same way we follow Jesus. We follow Jesus based on who he is, and through that, he changes us. Our fruits begin to look like his fruits. And by fruits, I mean the works that we do. So we no longer want to murder, if you were a murderer in here, right? Obviously, that's a little excessive. Hopefully, none of you are murderers in here. But we no longer want to operate in the things that we used to operate in. Paul tells us so clearly in Romans chapter 7 that he doesn't do what he wants to do, but he does do what he doesn't want to do. And he tells us very clearly that that's something other than him. And the only way that he's going to be saved is through Jesus, that freedom that Jesus brings. Freedom from sin, the law, and self-righteousness. Your goodness no longer matters in the sense that Jesus has changed you. Your self-righteousness, things that you decide to do, no longer matters. But the things that you decide to do change because you're following Jesus. You see what I'm saying? It's not faith plus works equals salvation. It's faith equals salvation, which results in works. Right? So we operate in this belief and we trust in Jesus, and he gives us freedom, and in that freedom we use it for good, for the good things he had planned for us. Not the bad things, not the things that I wanted to do in my flesh, but the good things that he had planned for us. So, point number one is you are free. You're free. You're free. If you didn't know, you're free. Point number 2 was you are free from sin, the law, and self-righteousness. Point number 3 is you are free for relationship. You're free for relationship with God and others. Let's focus on relationship with God first. In Galatians chapter 5, verse 5, it says, through the Spirit, we eagerly await by faith the righteousness for which we hope. We lean in to this righteousness. We wait for this righteousness, right? Because we know that to be in relationship with God, we have this faith in righteousness because we know that we couldn't stand before holy God in our own righteousness. So it creates the freedom for this relationship because I have the righteousness of Christ as he mediates for me. He allows me to be in relationship with the Father who's holy. Galatians 5:16 through 18 says, so I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh, right? That goes back to we don't do what we want to do, but we walk in relationship with the Spirit of God, and we choose to gratify the things of the Spirit, right? So for the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They conflict with each other so that you are not to do whatever you want. Oops, there we go again. Not to do whatever you want, right? But when I walk in step with the Spirit, I walk in relationship. It's not a set of rules, right? Even Paul is telling us, even right there, like, I am not walking in relationship with Jesus by following the rules, but I'm following the rules because I am walking in relationship with Jesus. If I walk by the Spirit, I'll do what the Spirit wants me to do. If I walk by the flesh, then I'm going to do what the flesh wants me to do. And I don't know about you, but I know my flesh wants me to do some pretty dumb stuff. I know my flesh has the desire to be self-satisfying, to do the things that I want to do, not the things that I know I should do. Galatians 5:25, it says, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. We walk with the Spirit. We talk with the Spirit. The Spirit of God dwells inside us, Colossians chapter 2. The Spirit of God dwells inside of us. We get to be in relationship with God. Now let's talk about relationship with others. Galatians chapter 5, verse 13, it says, if you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. Literally and figuratively. Don't go to those islands with those cannibals on them. Just saying. So, I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not satisfy the desires of your flesh. You will not gratify the desires of your flesh. We walk together. You see, if I was to walk with Eric, and we were to be friends, it'd be a really crummy friendship if I was selfish, or if Eric was selfish. It would be terrible that if my life revolved around whatever addiction that I might have, and I spent time with Eric or scheduled time with Eric and said, Eric, let's grab lunch on Tuesday at noon, but I had an addiction that caused me to not be free, to be able to be in control of my own schedule, to be able to operate, and I get to that point at about 11:30, and I'm like, man, I really need this, and now I tell Eric I can't be there because I got to do something else. Or I'm with Eric, and we're on a hike in the mountains, and a bear shows up, and I shove him to the ground and take off running, right? Right? Those are, two different things, but still selfish in nature. Don't go hiking with me, because I might do that to you. No, I'm just kidding. The other beautiful thing, Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 tells us to carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. What's the law of Christ? Well, to love God with everything you have. I don't say the 4 things Jesus says because I get them all mixed up and I add things to it on accident. So everything you have is basically what he's trying to say. And then love others as you love yourselves. When you carry the burdens of other people, when you operate in this place where we come together, remember, we can go fast alone, but we'll go farther together. Because I can carry a pitcher of water really fast like this for a long period of time. I could probably go a mile running with a pitcher of water. Maybe not running because it'd be sloshing around, right? But holding it like this. But if I had 15, 20 people passing that pitcher around, we'd be able to carry that thing a lot farther than a mile, right? I mean, think about it. A pitcher of water is not very heavy, but it eventually gets heavy. Something small in your life that you may be carrying by yourself, maybe not heavy right now, but it'll eventually get heavy. Or let's flip it on its head. Maybe you're crawling on your hands and knees because something just happened to you and you don't know what you're going to do next. You don't know how you're going to continue to move. You don't know how you're going to continue to operate because you just can't carry it anymore. First of all, the Bible tells us to give our burdens to the Lord, but it also tells us that we should carry those things together. We're free for relationship with others. Galatians chapter 6, verse 10, it says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. So who should we do good to? Just the people in this building? Just the people that attend another church we agree with? Just the people that say they're believers? No. We're good to all people. Doesn't mean we have to agree with everybody. I can tell you right now, I don't agree with a lot of people that don't agree with what Jesus says. But I can be good to them still. And then Paul adds there's a special, almost like another layer of goodness that we do have with one another. He says, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. You see, it's not a country club, but we do come together to help each other out, especially well. We're free for a relationship with God in relationship with others. As I close today, I just really want to encourage you. I started with the story of the elephant, which I always found really, really fascinating. I want to encourage you today that you are not an elephant. You're not an elephant. And by that, I don't mean you're not big and strong and awesome. What I mean is you're not trapped. You're not a slave. You're free. If you still feel like you're trapped after you've given your life to Jesus, can I tell you, it's just a tiny little rope that you're letting on your ankle. Through Christ, you have the strength, the ability, the reality to break that silly little rope right off your leg. You're free. It is for freedom's sake. There's only one reason you're free. It's for freedom's sake, so you can be free. Why are you free? You're free for relationship with God and others. You're free from the law, self-righteousness, trying to prove yourself. You're free from sin. You see, the world would tell you differently. The world would say, you do what you want to do. That's what truly makes you free. I was trapped in sin. So were you, whether you realized it or not. And I can tell you, I've never been more free than I am today with submitting my life to Jesus every morning and dying to myself and my desires daily to pursue Him. You're free when you give your life to Jesus, when you surrender and you submit. Because the world would tell you, no, you're free when you go out and party and drink and sleep around and do all these things. But Jesus would tell you, no, you're truly free when you operate in the fullness of who I've created you to be. That's when we're free. So today, if you're still trapped in sin, if you're still struggling with sin, I heard a pastor say it once, because I was struggling with sin after I got saved. I heard a pastor say it once. I want to encourage you that if you're still struggling, if you're still fighting, if you're still chasing after Jesus, and you still stumble sometimes, can I tell you, you're in a good place, because you haven't given up. You haven't said, this is my life. You haven't said that rope is going to keep me here forever. But can I tell you, you can be completely free. But you have to decide beforehand. You have to decide before you get into your room alone at night with your cell phone in hand. You have to decide, I'm going to put that thing on a charger, because I know when I'm alone in my room, I'm vulnerable. So I'm going to put it on a charger in the kitchen. You have to decide when those thoughts come into your head or that addiction comes around that I'm going to pre-decide I'm free from that, so I'm going to make the decision before I get into a situation to walk over to my neighbor's house or call Pastor Cooper or call a good friend, because I've pre-decided that I'm free from that, so I'm not going to let myself be burdened by slavery again, but I'm going to stand firm. You have to pre-decide to be free, no matter what it is, no matter how funny it looks. I had a friend tell me this. He said, I was in the best shape of my life right after my fiance broke off our engagement, because I was so tempted to find that intimacy in things online that I had made the decision that I'm not going to do that, but every time I feel that temptation, I'm just going to run until I don't feel it anymore. I'm going to pray to God while I'm running. He goes, I was running miles and miles and miles every single day. But he made the decision, I'm not going to be a slave to this thing. I'm going to pre-decide to keep my freedom, and it may look different. I'm not saying everybody's got to go for runs. It may look different. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's you know what, I'm going to sleep in the living room tonight because I'm struggling. And I know that in the living room's a common area and people will come in and out of there. Or maybe instead of going out with that group of friends, I'm going to pre-decide to make the right decision, because peer pressure is real. And if I haven't decided to stay away from those people that do those things that I'm trapped in, I'll just keep being the elephant with a little string wrapped around my leg, walking in the same circle. But the reality is you're free. There's no other reason for freedom than just to be free. So today I'm going to pray for you. And I'm going to tell you right now, every one of us, temptation is common to man. Until you die and meet the Lord face to face, you will feel temptation. It'll be the same temptation, because the devil's clever, but he's not a creator. So he'll tempt you the same thing in different ways. He'll try and put you in different situations to get you to fall into the same temptation. You know what that is. For you, I know what it is for me. So whatever that temptation is, whatever that struggle is, can I tell you that it's not going to be gone? But I can tell you that the Bible tells us that God is gracious enough to give us a way out. So I want you today, with every head bowed, every eye closed in this room, whatever it is between you and God, I'm going to pre-decide to be free from this. I'm going to pre-decide that instead of getting another glass of wine or getting another shot or going out and partying, or going out with a group of friends that gets into vandalism, or going out or going to my bedroom with my phone. I'm going to pre-decide between you and me right now, God. You have set me free for freedom's sake. There's no other reason that you've set me free but to know that I am free, and I'm going to make the decision right now, today, in this room, to stand firm and not be burdened by the yoke of slavery again. So, Father, as we come before you today, for each of us in this room, no matter what that temptation or sin struggle is, God, we choose today to be free. We choose today to make a decision that I'm not going to put myself in a position, to fall again. But I'm going to stand firm in the freedom that you've provided for me. I'm going to pre-decide to stay free. And God, we thank you for your grace. And we thank you for the fact that though we may fall again, your grace is sufficient for us. Though we may stumble again, your freedom is still freedom. But God, today we decide to remain free. We choose to do something different. We choose to break free of that string that we feel like is so tightly bound around our ankle, when reality is we can break it off and run free with you for all eternity. Still in a prayerful attitude, if you're in this room today and you are stuck in a cycle of addiction, you're stuck in a cycle of wrong decisions, or you are stuck lying or stealing or doing anything that you know you shouldn't be doing, and you want to break free, can I tell you that there's no willpower in you or on this earth or any consequence or any decision that's going to change your desire except for one. You see, the Bible says that who the Son sets free is free indeed, and it's for freedom's sake that he sets us free. There's only one way for us to have that freedom, and it's to surrender and submit our lives to Christ, which sounds backwards, but can I tell you, this is an upside-down kingdom that we live in. It is for freedom's sake that he sets us free, and when we submit our lives to him, he gives us freedom. You see, he died for you. He lived the life that none of us in this room could live so that we could be covered by his righteousness, because I just told you for an hour that our own righteousness won't work. So God, we just pray right now, if you're in this room, you realize that that's who you are, that you would just take a moment between you and God. Say, Jesus, that's me. I want to be free. God, I recognize that I am a sinner. And we have this simple saying here, trust and turn. We trust that Jesus did what he did. He lived a perfect life. He died a death that I deserved, and he rose again and is now seated at the right hand of the Father and forgives our sins. He mediates for us. We trust that. We turn from what we're doing and turn to him. Follow him. We're not the rich young ruler. If that's you in this room, I'm going to give you a second, but I want you to find me or any other staff member, or even go to the Next Steps booth and tell somebody about that decision, because remember, you can only carry that water pitcher so far by yourself. We want to walk this walk with you. Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the love that you've shown each and every one of us. Thank you for the freedom that you've given us. God, we praise you. We honor you. We glorify you. It's in your mighty name that we pray. Amen.
If you just prayed or have any questions at all, please let us know.